Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shanley Show. A little bit about this series. I got this idea from seeing a lot of book talk videos saying books I won't accept criticisms on, and I decided I wanted to do a couple videos like that, and not just for books, but for other things that I personally really love and don't think I would accept criticisms on, like movies, TV shows, characters, and so on. And it is perfectly okay to disagree with me if you don't like these books, if you want to critique these books, rip them apart. That is perfectly okay. For me and my space, these are things I won't accept criticisms on, critiques on, although I may agree with some criticisms about the books, but I will not be the first person to critique them. And while I will actively critique things, I won't necessarily verbalize any criticisms I have, and I won't necessarily go around just talking to people about all the criticisms I have for something. But with the things that I talk about in this series, these are things I just wholeheartedly love despite any possible criticisms. So the whole point of that is that you are allowed to disagree with me, you are allowed to have critiques about these things that I mentioned in this series, but I'm not going to accept critiques in my space, in my mental frame of these things that I mentioned within this series. With all that said, let's get into the 9 books I will not accept critiques on. First up is The Hobbit. This story has been around with me since childhood and I absolutely love it. And yes, there are some issues with it, but this is an absolutely great story. And second up is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I am showing this as one whole book because that is kind of how Tolkien originally intended to publish it, but at the time Tolkien first wrote it and published it, it would have been too expensive to publish it as one whole book, which is why he divided it into the 3, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. But this is another story that I've been around since childhood and has just been a love of mine for so many years. Next up is Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. I'm usually not one for contemporary romances or contemporary stuff in general. The contemporary genre is usually hit or miss for me, and when I read this one, I went into it with really low expectations, and then I read it and loved it because it is such a great coming of age story and such a great commentary on friendship and family and love and finding yourself. The fourth book is Bravely by Maggie Stiefvater. I absolutely love the Disney Pixar movie Brave. It is one of my favorite Disney movies, one of my favorite Pixar movies. Just having like a sequel book to it brings you back into the world. You get to know Merida more, you get to know her brothers more, and you get to explore the world of Scotland in Brave more within this book, and I absolutely loved it. Next up is Almost There, A Disney Twisted Tale by Farah Rochon. Princess and the Frog is my other favorite Disney movie, and I absolutely love Tiana. I love the characters in it, the story, the world, and again, we get to explore that more, and we get to see another side of the Princess and the Frog story, and a more darker side to the story, and the consequences of certain actions that we didn't necessarily see in the original movie. Books 6 and 7 are the Six Crimson Cranes duology, Six Crimson Cranes, and The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This story is based loosely around the Wild Swan story, The Three Ravens, if you know those stories, along with a couple of other fairy tales, and these 2 books do such an amazing job at retelling that story and showing how much our main character Shiori grows during the time of her journeys. And I absolutely fell in love with the world and the characters and the story and the magic, and I just think that this is overall a really great duology. Book 8 is The Circus Train by Amita Parikh. I read this at the end of last year, at the end of 2022, and I fell in love with her main character story and just the world she has to grow up with and how she has to grow up, the friendships she makes, the relationships she has to keep up, and just how she keeps persevering throughout this entire ordeal that she has to deal with. And in ninth spot is The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. I was a little bit nervous going into this one. I did judge it based on its cover, which is why I got it, and the title too. Once I started reading it and really getting into the story and relating to the main character, it was a really fun ride and a really interesting story to read about. And as an honorable mention, just because it's a group of books, any Natasha Lester books, a little image should be coming up right around here. So The Paris Seamstress, The Paris Orphan, The Paris Secret, The Riviera House, and The Three Lives of Alex St. Pierre specifically. Once I started reading her books, starting off with The Paris Orphan, I fell in love with these stories. I'm the first person who will go up to bat and say we need some more historical fiction outside of the World Wars, World War I and World War II. We need more historical fiction outside of that world and outside of that time period. I'm the first person who will say that, but I fell in love with these stories, most of which center around World War II. These books have such amazing female main characters. There's just the right amount of romance, the right amount of intrigue, and there's fashion too. And these books are just such amazing reads and such heartfelt reads that there's no way I couldn't include them in this list, and there's no way I'm going to accept any criticism on these books. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for my next video.